Hi, I'm Kristen, and today I'll be providing a contact update from here in Maine. So I realize that a lot of the videos on my channel have related to kind of like the big experiences, the big contact moments that I've had in my life, and I touch on some different contact kind of modalities and different concepts related to non-human intelligence. But I pretty infrequently talk about kind of like what goes on in my daily life, and I have daily to near daily contact in some way, shape, or form. So that could come in the form of kind of telepathy or mental images that are kind of just downloaded into me, like just quick flashes that come out of nowhere and they're gone. It also relates to kind of seeing orbs outside all the time, seeing shadows and sparkly lights happening inside my home, or um, electronics just turning themselves on. Like, it's a whole array of different types of things that have been happening to me on an almost daily basis. But I thought that I would come on here and I would talk about kind of what's been going on with me this week. And maybe in the future, I will kind of continue on with this if there are really any kind of notable moments of contact that are happening that I usually would just skim over. Um, so on May 8th, which was just not that long ago, that was the day that the Department of War released a bunch of files related to UAPs. So they put out videos and PDFs and all of that. And so I did make a video here about kind of like my favorite videos that were released. But later that night, I saw a lot of orbs outside. And so I hadn't thought much of it earlier. I see orbs most clear nights. But I wanted to kind of mention now that it was different from how it typically is. So when I was having that kind of moment night of contact on the 8th, there were orbs everywhere. So if I might typically see an orb come out of nowhere and flash at me and then disappear, or a flash bulb over my home, um, that might be like the kind of like big contact moments of the night. But on the 8th, I was seeing like 20, 30 orbs that were just going crisscrossing all over the place, like all over my property. Um, and as I was watching them, I was noticing that like a lot of these orbs were like pairing up, but coming from different directions. So I was noticing like something would be coming from like the south, and like one of these orbs would just show up and appear coming from the south going north, and another orb would appear not too far away from it, just out of nowhere, coming from like the northwest. And like they would kind of like, as they were moving, it would be like they'd pretty much like almost like look like they were about to hit each other, and then they wouldn't. And so I kept seeing that like over and over and over again. So like maybe like 8 to 12 times I saw these orbs that were appearing to almost hit and crisscross. Except the way that it was looking, it was like they were kind of like dancing in the sky above me. And as all of this was happening, it was just like occurring to me that it felt like all of these lights in the sky, like they're intelligent, like there's some type of non-human intelligence or piloted, controlled by non-human intelligence. And it just felt like they were very happy and almost like dancing because of like the release that had happened earlier that day. It was like they were just like joyful about there being disclosure that was starting to happen at like this kind of like wider scale. So that was a lot of fun. And then a couple of nights ago, there was a moment that I had with my son that was kind of telepathic that I figured it would be fun to mention here. And so I was laying in bed and I was reading a thread on the Experiencers subreddit. So hello if you're from there and you're watching this video. And the thread was about like a great solar flash. And so the person that made this post was saying like they had a vision or a dream that they saw this like golden flash from like the first person and the third person, and it was like super super bright, almost like blinding. And they were asking for people's like feedback on have you seen anything like this or about this. So I was just reading through the comments, like in my head, mentally. I had my 6-year-old son laying in bed next to me. And so I thought he was asleep. So I guess he was mostly asleep. And so while I was reading through, he kind of just turned over onto his side and he said, Mommy, will the sun blow up in a million, billion, trillion years? And so, I mean, like that's such a kind of like a 6-year-old thing to say. Um, but it was interesting the way that he phrased it, and he understood like the concept of what I was reading about. So in my mind, there were very few people that were actually like saying like sunburst, sun explosion, or anything like that. But in my mind, I visualize like when I'm reading people's stories and experiences. So as people are talking, like I could see the pictures of like what they were saying, like in my mind. So it almost felt like my son was able to kind of like pick up on the imagery that I was thinking of as I was reading. And he was able to kind of like pose that question to me. And it's funny, like the next morning after he woke up and like he was fully cognizant and awake and everything. I was like, do you know why you asked me that question about like the sun blowing up? And he couldn't remember. He said, I don't know, I don't remember. And so there have been other things that he's said, kind of like about past lives, and I'm just knowing something. And then when I ask him, like, why did you say that, or why did you ask me this, he'll always say, I don't know. Like, I don't know where it came from. So it's another one of those moments, and I just thought it was really interesting that it was like this kind of telepathic bond between like mother and child, and it was around also around that 5 to 6 year old age range that my daughter had also heard my thoughts on a few occasions. So I don't know when it'll wear off. It'll wear off, but very cute, and I really enjoyed like kind of having that interaction with him. And then earlier today, I was meditating while I was kind of like laying down, and so I've been kind of having some different like life struggles lately, and so I was just like hoping that I would kind of get any kind of insight into like what's been going on with me, with my life, just everything going on. And so I got some pretty interesting, strange visuals that came out of nowhere. I suppose that were like a download, just telepathic. So I suppose these would be categorized as clairvoyant. And so I saw a woman that was very thin, with like very large hair, and she was sitting on at a piano bench, playing piano, and she was singing. So I couldn't. It was almost like kind of very hazy and in the distance. Like I couldn't make out if it was an actual song or what was being sang, but I could just hear this music being played by this woman. And so she was wearing this like floor length, glittery silver sequin gown. So the best way that I would describe this is like with the big hair, like dark hair, and like the long gown. It was almost like watching Diana Ross from back in the 1970s or the 1980s when she was like really in her prime. And so this woman, she finished playing, and then I don't know if anybody's ever seen Twin Peaks: The Return. This isn't really a spoiler, I guess. It's just like a very small, strange Lynchian thing that happens in the show. This musician, she kind of like grabbed her face and she pulled it back and then pulled it off, and the whole time her face was just like beaming and like super happy and joyful. And so she took this mask off, and then she like kind of like held it down in her hand as she like walked off, but she was like walking off like this, like very confidently, and like with a swag to her. And so it was like, even though her mask was off, she continued to like carry the same type of energy. And after that, it's like she walked off into the darkness. So this whole scene, it was like the piano and the woman were just in this black void. So she walked off into the distance and was gone. And then next, like the scene cut to a man that was sitting like on this bench, and I couldn't see his face. So he was sitting down. He was very thin. He was wearing like regular blue jeans and like a button up top, and short, darker hair. And he was just like holding his hand like in his, or holding his face like in his hands like this. And he was like had his head down the whole time. And so he just like looked completely like despondent and upset. And what I could see, because it's like when these kind of clairvoyant messages or clairvoyant images come in, they're super super clear, like way more clear than I can see even from like looking around my room right now. And so I could see that like through this man's hands, his face was blurry and it was getting like jumbled and distorted. And so I could see that this was relating to kind of like the woman musician I had just seen, where there was clearly like a mask that was on this man, and it was falling away. And so he was not trying to detach it like the woman had before and like take it off and like get rid of the mask. He was trying to kind of like hold it in place while this like mask can no longer kind of like exist or be there anymore. And so this man, I watched him stand up, still holding his face, and he at a certain point it seemed like he realized like he couldn't do this anymore. Like that mask was going to be gone, and his whole face kind of like darkened and blurred out and was just dark, and like he held his head down like as much as he could so that like I couldn't see him. And he walked off into the void, into the darkness. And the way that I interpreted that after I kind of got out of the meditation is that as experiencers, so many of us are masking. I mean, like, this is a very weird lifestyle that we have, very, very strange things that we go through. And most people don't believe us. Most people think that we're completely out of our minds, and we're mentally unwell. And so we put on these masks as if this isn't happening to us when it is. And I was just getting like this really strong feeling because both of these people seem to be like directly looking at me, responding to me, having like an interaction with me. That it was these are like experiencers specifically, and this woman was like confidently like, well, this mask that I'm putting on about myself is like very happy, but I could take that away and I'm still a happy, outgoing, like very charismatic person. And so she kind of like owned it, even with like taking this mask off and like showing kind of like who she truly was. And this man, on the other hand, was like not wanting that at all. So like he had like just kind of like his normal everyday man face on. And he was struggling to just like kind of keep it no matter how much it was becoming apparent that he couldn't do that anymore, and he had to be kind of like his authentic self. And with watching him walk away, he clearly did not want people to see his authentic self and his vulnerability and all that. And so it was just like this dichotomy showing of like, you're going to have to at some point in the future be very honest and open with kind of like everyone, with the world, about who you are and what you think and the things that you've gone through. And like, you're not going to have a choice but for kind of like the facade that you've been putting up to go away. So it's just like this kind of message. I would say like maybe not really to me as much, because I'm pretty open about all the things that I've gone through. Like I am on here and I talk to my family, even family members that don't want to hear it. I talk to them about the things that I'm going through. But if anybody is watching this and they feel like they're in this position of putting on a mask to their friends, to their family, even to other experiencers, because there could be kind of butting of heads if people feel like, well, why don't I have that type of contact, or like, why isn't my contact bigger like somebody else's? Like there's animosity that can arise even in the experiencer community. It seems like this message was saying, it's like, well, you can't account for how other people are going to react to you, but what is going to happen is that like the truth will out, like you're not really going to have a choice in the future coming up, in order to like stay hidden or be this kind of like fake normal person, um, that maybe it would be easier to be. The message just seemed like it was like, just own who you are, own what you've gone through, own everything about yourself that is you, because there's kind of like no way around it. Okay, and so like that little piece of the meditation, when that man walked off into the void, then I was given a super quick flash of something else that was completely out of left field. And so in this part of the meditation, I was just shown a flash of little gray birds sitting in a little circle out in my field. So I have a field like right up next to my house. And so as I was watching these birds, they kind of like raised their wings up, and like their wings formed like this like little triangular formation. And it showed like all of these birds, they all their little triangle wings were all facing the same direction. When they lifted off like in formation. And so it started out still as being like kind of like the circle, but then it formed into even the triangle birds being like making up a triangle as they like soared higher and higher into the sky. And so I know there's been a lot of talk about like orbs turning into what look like planes or large drones or just like other types of objects recently, or even like strange looking objects that you can't really make sense of. And it seemed like it was almost like touching on that concept a bit of, there are these kind of like natural intelligent beings, living beings like birds, and they can kind of morph themselves into looking like something that is more geometric, or potentially even like mechanical because of the geometric type of shape of these things, just that they can kind of fly under the radar without people like really noticing them or realizing that they're there, or there's something strange in the sky that is capable of like hearing them and communicating with them. And then at that point I kind of like completely came out of the meditation, and I wasn't able to see anything anymore. um, yeah, I just wanted to share on here because it was like a lot going on, and I thought it would be kind of fun to talk about today. And going into the future, it's like these types of things come up in my life so often, and I kind of just write them down in like my little notepad on my phone, and then I continue on with my life and kind of essentially forget about them. But for other people that maybe have like this amount of contact or this type of contact, and they don't want to feel alone, and kind of like feeling like they're constantly being bombarded, I guess, by in different types of intelligence giving them messages or letting them know things. I just wanted to kind of make all of this known. And I do think it would be fun in the future to kind of talk about these types of things as they end up happening, and not just only talking on here about like big sightings, like a gray showing up in my house, or like this huge kind of display out in my yard in the sky, like if I see figures or something. Like there are all these like kind of like smaller things that happen, and these are the types of things that kind of like define us as experiencers. It's not just one or two moments that stand out to most of us. As far as contact, it's almost all of us are having ongoing, frequent contact, and this is kind of what it's like. So if you have any questions about the things that I've spoken about, or other kind of like little tiny daily things that are happening to me that are kind of paranormal or weird, please feel free to ask and I will get back to you. So thank you so much for listening today, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.